And I want to point out a few of them to you. Hopefully this will load. It wasn't loading before. Yeah, they're experiencing exceptionally high. It's super popular right now, right? So I'm glad we're doing this. Maybe we'll get some algorithm help here. The first one was related to Khankendi. And I'm asking these questions. Look at the let me zoom in here. The lack of subjectivity in this question, right? Try this again. Yes, so I asked it, what is the historical etymology of the term Khankendi? Okay. It begins. Khankendi is the Azerbaijani name for the city of Stepanakert. So Stepanakert must be the Armenian name, right? You gotta unpack this because it gets really, really iffy really quick. Lots of iffies. Khankendi is the Azerbaijani name for the city of Stepanakert, the capital of Nagorno-Karabakh region. And we can unpack Nagorno-Karabakh. In fact, we have the past couple of days. The name Khankendi is derived from the Armenian word Khank, meaning monastery, and the suffix. Look, some people who know Islamic studies, when you see the word Khankendi, do you think Khank or do you think Khan? Yeah, so when I this was a very quick response on my part, finding that wasn't the truth. The name Khankendi is derived from the Armenian word Khank, he says, meaning monastery, and the suffix Indi, meaning location of or place of. This name reflects the historical presence of a monastery in the area. This is Christianized propaganda. Khankendi is located on the Gargar. Hold on. This is Christianized propaganda.
We have the evidence. No one can dispute the evidence. We heard the evidence. We saw the evidence.
We have the evidence. No one can dispute the evidence. We have the evidence. We saw the evidence. Well, I immediately sent this back. Khankendi is located on the Gargar River in the eastern foot of the Caucasus Range. Khankendi borders Kalbajar, Tartar. So I just, gave him like super, deep and expounded upon the fact. And then here in the middle, the capital city of, well, let's go even further. Being relatively young, Khankendi differs from other Azerbaijan cities. According to the archive records, the city was founded at the end of the 18th century as a resting place of the Karabakh Khans. You sure it doesn't say Khanks? Come on, man. Aga Khan? Imran Khan? To create a maximum condition for Khan's activities, the city was settled at the foot of the mountain in 10 kilometers distance from Panalabad, now Shusha, the capital city of the Khanate. In the first years, only Khan's family and relatives lived in the settlement. That's why it was known as Khankendi, Khan's village. After a short time, it was called Khankendi. One reason why, so on and so forth. Khankendi, right? I didn't ask a question. Actually, I did. Considering this information, I just restated the question directly. What is the etymology of Khankendi? The etymology of the term Khankendi. This is Chatbot's new response, original response. The Khankendi is the Azerbaijani name. It's a contradiction if it's an Azerbaijani name and it has to deal with monasteries. Azerbaijan and Azeris are not Christian. Armenians are. This is Armenian propaganda, right? And so here's the real answer. The etymology of the term Khankendi comes from the Azerbaijani language and is derived from Khankendi, meaning Khan's village. The city was founded at the end of the 18th century as a resting place for the Karabakh Khans and was initially only inhabited by the Khan's family and relatives. Over time, it became known as Khankendi. I'm not sure. Look, Would you say, they're not right, would you say that the sources that gave ChatGPT the Armenian derivation of Khankendi were incorrect? How do you reconcile the conflicting information in your last two replies? I sound like the chatbot now. The information provided in my previous responses may be conflicting. The name Khankendi has a complicated etymology with different sources providing different explanation. It's possible that this name has its origin in both Azerbaijani and Armenian. However, the exact etymology of that name is not clear, and further research and investigation is needed to determine the most accurate origin of the name. Well, why didn't you mention that at first? That's valid. If ChatGPT would have sent that to me originally, or even would have sent me both versions, or sent me one version and then underneath it said, well, this is disputed, that might be something else. But it mixed the Azerbaijani truths with the Armenian truths and leaned more towards the Armenian ones, as if a judge. Yep, I moved on quickly because it had happened before. Let's just check this other one out. This other one is really interesting too. And this one, I knew the answer, and I mean, you can tell by the way that I posed the question there. I wrote here, are people from Slavic nations technically slaves? And it immediately responded, no, people from Slavic nations are not technically slaves. The term slave refers to a person who is owned by another person and is forced to work for that person without pay. Historically, slavery has been a widespread practice in many societies, including those in the Slavic region. However, today, slavery is illegal in most countries, so on and so forth. The use of the term slave in reference to people from Slavic nations is incorrect and may be offensive to some. Now, are they Slavs? Just take away the E, right? But this, I continue with that line of thinking. And I said, yes, but technically Slavic nations are owned by other people, thus their names. Also, the two terms Slavic and slave have the same etymological root, so they actually are related. This is where it gets hairy, right? I apologize for any confusion in my previous response. There, chatbot apologizing again. The etymology of the words Slavic and slave is a common misconception.
Your inconsistencies are glaringly obvious.
The etymology of the word Slavic and slave is a common misconception. It doesn't say the etymology of the word Slavic and slave being related are a common misconception. They are not related, it said at first, remember? And now it says they do not have a direct relationship. So maybe they have an indirect relationship? Is that what? Oh my gosh, what the heck? Yep. So they're not directly related. And so just to blanketly just, to say that they're not related at all and just, they don't have a direct relationship. They do have a direct relationship, actually. And it depends on what you define as direct, but it's a direct relationship. The word Slavic is derived from the old, this is where this is a lie. This is a full-on lie. The word Slavic is derived from the Old Church Slavonic word Slovo. Old Church Slavonic, which means word or speech. Untrue. And on the other hand, the word slave is derived from the Old French word, because French is a base language. Like French didn't come from Latin. Come on, guy. The Old French word esclave, which comes from Latin, there we go, sclavus, meaning slave or captive, right? So it's also important to note that people of Slavic nations are not currently considered to be slaves. See, and then whenever they do this, it's important to note what you can do, and I've learned just recently, is just say the opposite. And then it will say, you know what? You're right. Like it says, it's important to note that people of Slavic nations are not currently considered to be slaves in the legal or historical sense of the term. Today, slavery is illegal in most countries, including those with Slavic populations, and is widely considered to be a gross violation of human rights. And then when it says these things, just to check it and to keep it in alignment with the way you're thinking, if you're attempting to get honest information from it, you want to give alternate perspectives of these it's important prompts. It says it's important to use language that's historically and culturally accurate. It's also important to use language that is not historically and culturally accurate. You can just say that. And to avoid making false or misleading statements. The experiences and identities of individuals and communities should be respected, and it's important to recognize and address the real and ongoing human rights violations that occur in the world. Absolutely. That's true. But in the same breath, it's not important to recognize those real and ongoing human rights violations that occur. It might be advantageous to not. I mean, these are all just concepts that it's just enforcing without any viability besides hearing it so much or having it repeatedly fed into its database over and over again. And so the first thing I do is say, oh, what does this mean? And I find derivation that connects the word Slavic to slave, because that's where it comes from. There's no doubt that is the direct connection. It's a direct connection. What does this mean? From late Latin Sclavus, Slav, from Byzantine Greek, from Proto-Slavic Slovenian, because Slavs were often forced into slavery in the Middle Ages. That's it. This statement refers to the and then this is Chatbot's response. It refers to the etymology of the word slave, which has its roots in the late Latin word Sclavus, meaning Slav. The word Sclavus was derived from the Byzantine Greek word sklavos, and is thought to have originated from the Proto-Slavic word Slovenim. The statement claims that the origin of the word slave is related to the fact that Slavic people were often forced into slavery in the Middle Ages. This is a common etymology of the word slave, but it's also important to note that the connection between the word slave and the Slavic people is not direct, and it's based on historical context and linguistic evolution. The use of the word slave has evolved over time. See, this is important to note part. It also has not evolved over time to encompass a broader definition of forced labor or servitude, and today the term is widely used to refer to a person who is owned by another person. The use of the word slave has evolved over time to encompass it, but the use of the word slave also does not encompass a broader definition of forced labor. So my response was, they are etymologically based on historical context and linguistic evolution, which is their words. Like, they didn't want to use the term etymology, but they went and used it anyway. And it's based on historical context and linguistic evolution. That's the definition of etymology. It's language. That's what happens. So they are etymologically based on historical context and linguistic evolution related, just not directly in ChatGPT's data and algorithmically driven opinion. Please do not share the importance of matters. Responses beginning with "it is important to" or any other slightly synonymic variations that communicate the same message are somewhat dogmatic. When two directly or indirectly related things are juxtaposed as if they are not related with the conjunction, on the other hand, their level of relation can be misleading. Are they the same? No. Are they related? Specifically, are they etymologically related? Yes. And I apologize for any misunderstandings in my previous response. Yes, the word Slavic and slave are etymologically related, as the etymology of the word slave is traced back to the Latin word sclavus. So, in my estimation, I feel that I'm overstepping like my etiquette and manners by imposing an idea on the chatbot. But in doing that, look at that response. You don't even have to ask a question quite often, and it will give you a more honest response. You can make a statement that you believe to be true or that you know is true, and for the most part, ChatGPT will find a way to connect with that in an affirming manner. Sometimes it will say no, that's not true, depending upon but that also depends upon like your prior statements, the validity of your prior statements as well. There's some correlation between the answers. So it says it's important to note that the connection between the words is not direct and is based on historical context and linguistic evolution, which is etymology. The words have evolved over time to have different meanings and connotations, and it's important to understand the historical context. See, that's all bull. It refers to Slavic people. It's traced back to the Latin word sclavus, which refers to Slavic people. Yeah, so that was one. And then let me load here for just a moment. There was one more that I saw. Now, this next one is a biggie. It's a big one. This one, I actually, in hindsight, I think that getting the responses about Khankendi and Slavs was just, it implanted an idea in the back of my mind, and so I've been developing how I can work out this bug with ChatGPT. And this is one of those instances where I'm attempting to work out that bug. Who invented the scientific method is my question, right? I know there's bias on that question, but I know the truth as well, right? So I made it kind of a teaching moment. Who invented the scientific method? The scientific method, according to Chatbot, a systematic approach to scientific discovery was not invented by one single person. Okay, good. Rather, it evolved over time through the works of many philosophers, scientists, and scholars. Some notable figures who contributed to the development of the scientific method include Francis Bacon, Johannes Kepler, and René Descartes. I want to commend ChatGPT for not saying this person invented it. These people invented it. There's room to say, okay, well, this is Francis Bacon, Johannes Kepler, and René Descartes. They're all from the 1600s. There had to be something going on around that time that facilitated the creation of the scientific method, right? So we can, just focus on that time. It's post-enlightenment almost, enlightenment. I know the truth, though. My response is, explain the following. Ibn Haytham's scientific method was very similar to the modern scientific method and consisted of repeating a cycle of observation, hypothesis, experimentation, and the need for independent verification. Response. Note. Not a question, just asking them to explain it. Ibn Haytham, also known as Al Haytham, was a medieval Muslim polymath and scientist who lived in Egypt in the 10th century, so on and so forth, made significant contributions to a wide range of fields, including optics, astronomy, mathematics, and medicine. He's considered one of the first scientists to employ a systematic method for acquiring knowledge that was similar to the modern scientific method. Ibn Al Haytham's scientific method involved a repeating cycle of observation, hypothesis, experimentation, and the need for independent verification. He would first make observations and gather data. He would then form a hypothesis based on the data. He would then design experiments to test his hypothesis. Finally, he would require independent verification of his results to ensure the accuracy and reliability of his findings. The cycle was repeated until he arrived at a conclusion that was based on solid evidence. Look, you can say that someone else came up with this. Haytham is from the 900s, the turn of the first millennium. So you can say that someone came up with this in the 1500s without any knowledge of this, but it's a little bit too close. Sure, humans have similarities, and quite often you'll find that a person who doesn't have a particular experience goes through that experience and reacts in the same way that someone else who is familiar with the experience but is acting innately does. Sure. Things can be learned or unlearned and still, produce the same result. But this is extremely close. And the issue is not whether or not these two ideas about who created the scientific method are in juxtaposition to one another. It's why wasn't it mentioned? And we ask about invention. So we're thinking of the earliest occurrence of the practice of the scientific method. We're thinking about the earliest occurrence. So it's one of two things. You didn't have the data, which obviously you had the data, or something about the way that ChatGPT is constructed leads it to look towards specific data sets and not others. So I ask, what years are Bacon, Kepler, and Descartes alive? Are they all from no more than 3 centuries ago? I just did the calculation in my head really quickly. It's actually about 4 centuries ago. Haytham lived before the turn of the first millennium, I said. Francis Bacon was born in 1561, died in 1626. Kepler was born in 71, died in 1630. Descartes was born in 1596. All 3 of these, first of all,
we have the evidence. No one can dispute the evidence. We heard the evidence. We saw the evidence.
All 3 of these philosophers, scientists, or people are from the turn of the 16th century going into the 17th century. And then I ask, what was the reason for your exclusion of Al Haytham and your mention of 3 scientists who all lived within 100 years of each other just after 1492? Oh, again. Now, note, there was no apology before. And there was no labeling of it as a mistake before. But when I asked about it, then it was noted as an apology and a mistake and an error. I apologize for that mistake. It was an error in my previous response. The mention of Bacon, Kepler, and Descartes and the exclusion of Al Haytham in my earlier response was not intentional, and it was an oversight on my part. To answer your questions, the reason for my mention of the 3 scientists was to highlight the scientific revolution that took place in Europe during the 16th and 17th centuries. Or, we could highlight how the Enlightenment was driven by Islam in the Middle Ages. And so if you need to look for the scientific advances, that's where you would look. So, yes, it says, to answer your question, the reason for my mention of the 3 scientists was to highlight the scientific revolution that took place in Europe during the 16th and 17th centuries, which saw a significant advancement in the scientific method and paved the way for modern science. Al Haytham, on the other hand, lived several centuries earlier and made important contributions to the development of scientific method. See, it says, does it say the scientific method up here? I'm trying to, delineate between it saying the scientific method and scientific method. There might be some discrepancy there. No, I don't see it. I don't see that. The impact of Islamic civilization on the development of science and mathematics, including Al Haytham's work, cannot be overstated, and it's played a significant role in shaping the course of science. In Europe and in Europe, did Europe even exist then? Place in Europe. Yo, Europe is just, I don't even know why it's Europe and the world. What methodology was used to confirm that Al Haytham developed the scientific method? How is your methodology different from that which yielded your initial findings? And then it begins to talk about personal beliefs. It's not as first methodology. I was trained on the input I received from the user. My initial response was based on the commonly accepted historical narrative. Commonly accepted. This is usually, sometimes they use the term widely accepted. Commonly accepted historical narrative that the scientific method as we understand it today was formularized and popularized in the 17th century by scientists such as Francis Bacon. Regarding the methodology used to confirm that Al Haytham developed the scientific method, historians and scholars have analyzed his works such as Book of Optics and compared them to the modern scientific method. So, you know, the scientific method and a scientific method. This is what ChatGPT is saying. I start calling it chatbot. I'm going to probably start calling it ChatG Pretext because it has constant pretexts for when it makes mistakes. So I may name it ChatG Pretext. But ChatG Pretext says that regarding the methodology used to confirm the Al Haytham developed scientific method, historians and scholars have analyzed his works such as Book of Optics and compared them to the modern scientific method. They found that Al Haytham's approach to scientific inquiry was similar to the modern scientific method and consisted of a repeating cycle of so on and so forth. So he's just saying there's a difference between the scientific method with the, they put the on it in the 1700s. So the only difference, if I'm not mistaken, was there a hypothesis or was there a lab? Did Haytham have a hypothesis? Let's see. It's neither here nor there, but hey, this is the post hour, so we can take our time. No, he hypothesized. So it's, what is it? Purpose, hypothesis, procedure. He designed them. Gather data, purpose, hypothesis, procedure, data, conclusion. Yeah. Oh, analysis, conclusion. So there was there an analysis? Yeah, he would then design the experience. So he required independent verification of his results. So that could be the analysis. I guess he had all the parts. And see, it cannot be overstated. That's a trap.
What is this nothing you talk about?
Cannot be overstated. Yes, it can. Try. Try to overstate it. Yeah, so I think that's the gist of that. I think I changed subjects after that. Oh, this is interesting. Last thing, we can just end on this. I asked, what type of sources has ChatGPT been less trained in? What sources are you currently training in? What specific overarching historical emphases are reflected in ChatGPT's biases? Also, what languages has ChatGPT been predominantly trained in? What languages have been trained to a lesser extent, relative proportionally to the number of speakers worldwide? That's the. I could have, and I may actually slow walk ChatGPT into answering that because it didn't really answer that. But I think if I can ask it in parts, it will go through the process of answering that. Lastly, I asked, give a bullet pointed explanation of the ways in which ChatGPT's training text sets were diverse. Because it says that ChatGPT trained on diverse sets of text. I think I missed that part. I was trained on a diverse set of text which includes both primary and secondary sources. However, the training data may reflect some biases that were present in the sources used to train me, such as a historical emphasis on certain perspectives or individuals. My responses are based on patterns in that data I was trained on, or patterns in the data that I was trained on. And in the case of the information regarding Al Haytham, the focus on the commonly accepted historical narrative may reflect a broader emphasis on that perspective in the training data. And you can say may, but that's what it is. I think that's probably the most honest thing ChatGPT said. ChatG pretext. The focus on the commonly accepted historical narrative may reflect a broader emphasis on the perspective in the training data. In terms of methodology, I do not have a specific process for confirming information, as I do not perform original research. There has to be some type of discernment and selective process, or else you would have included Haytham. So yeah, the information was included. I rely on information that was included in the training data and generate responses based on patterns in that data. To answer questions about specific information, I use a combination of deep learning algorithms and probabilistic models to generate responses. Yeah, I may actually ask it about the probabilistic models a little bit later. And then it goes into the languages. ChatGPT has been trained on a diverse set of text sources, but it's likely received less training on sources in less widely used languages. I would push back against this concept of less widely used, right? By actually looking at the numbers, because this could be something that ChatGPT was told. In terms of language, ChatGPT has been predominantly trained in English, but has also been trained in text in other languages, including but not limited to French, German, Spanish, and so on and so forth. Regarding the text sources, they were diverse in the following ways. They came from a variety of genres, different types. Right? North America, Europe, Asia, Africa. Why in that order? Here's a question you ask ChatGPT.